Unless and again to declare. No, okay, can we therefore go to item 3E, which is a review of service balances, and Joe will take us through that. Joe.
Thank you and good morning, members. Members, as you know, this is the review of service and corporate balances that takes place each year following the conclusion of the external audit of the Council's annual accounts. The review took place alongside the East Ayrshire Reforms Quarter 3 meetings with heads of service, and the recommendations in this report are contained in paragraph 2, and the East Ayrshire Reforms report that is the next item on the agenda today has assumed that the approvals noted in this report have been agreed. The report itself notes that our audited accounts for 2022-23 shows that the Council has around £96 million of reserves, and these are shown at paragraph 5. It's important to note that in terms of the Capital Fund, the Housing Revenue Account and the General Fund committed balances, that these all have commitments scored against them for use in subsequent years as part, for example, to repay debt in the case of the Capital Fund, or in the case of the Housing Revenue Account to support the Strategic Housing Investment Programme. The table at paragraph 6 expands on the information and provides details of the General Fund committed balances held by each service. It shows members the transient nature of service balances, with services taking the opportunity to draw balances down in year and also to commit other balances at the year end. All of this is in line with the reserve strategy that Council set in February last year, and the actions taken by services in both utilising and managing balances supports effective financial management and allows services to undertake long-term financial planning, all of which is important, particularly in terms of the challenges faced by some services at the current time. The proposals that flow from the review begin at paragraph 7 and show that £2.368 million has been released by both services and also by balances held centrally due to their corporate nature. In previous balance reviews, the recommendations that I put before Cabinet was that the funds that had been released would be transferred to the General Fund uncommitted balance in order to ensure that the balance was sufficient both in terms of the thresholds expected by Audit Scotland and also in terms of the potential use, if needed, to respond to urgent matters. On this occasion, members, the recommendations from this report asks Cabinet to approve £1.5 million of the released balances be transferred equally to communities and economy, to wellbeing and to education, to provide support to these budgets while colleagues and budget holders continue their work on the reviews that have commenced in these areas. In education, the transfer would support the budget pressure in additional support needs transport rather than the overspend in early years. The remaining £868,000 from the balances review would see £500,000 being used to support pressures within council tax reduction, with the remaining £368,000 being used to bolster the General Fund uncommitted balance, taking it to just over £11 million or 2.9% of our net revenue expenditure. In line with previous practice, details of all balances are attached to Appendix 1, together with a description of the balance and a recommendation to release or to retain. Chair, I'm happy to stop there and take any questions.
Thanks, Joe. Appreciate the pressures in terms of the budgetary pressures that we're facing just now, and thank you, you and your team for the hard work you're doing just now. But can I open up to questions to members? Any points or questions? No hands up. Okay. Joe, anything else? Okay, can we go to recommendations there on page 59? Can we agree the recommendations?
Good.
Okay, thanks, members. Okay, go back to item 2 now, and that's the East Ayrshire Performance Summary Report. We'll begin with Joe, if you can take the lead here.
Thank you. Members, this is the penultimate East Ayrshire Reforms Report of this financial year, and the last before Council meets later this month to set the budget for 2024-2025. At Q1 East Ayrshire Reforms Report, members will recall that the overspend within Council services was £9.5 million. This reduced to £7.2 million at Q2. And after taking account of the ballast transfers from the earlier report and taking account of the work budget holders have undertaken to utilise external funding and to review expenditure plans, The net overspend in this report is £5.4 million. I recognise the valuable work that colleagues across all services have undertaken to bring budgets back into line wherever possible and to reduce projected overspend. And while the downward movement in the overspend itself is extremely positive, we must always acknowledge that service budgets are experiencing unprecedented strain from a mixture of higher costs for goods and services and increasing demand and need for services. Therefore, members, in terms of the report before you, and more importantly in terms of this financial year, we will continue to work to bring the budgets back online. But I have to add that this will be significantly more challenging in the years ahead, which is why the current reviews of service provision being undertaken across various services are important. The initial paragraphs explain the financial improvements arising from the review of service balances, and note the uncommitted balance, as I said a few moments ago, just over £11 million or 2.9%. Members, when you met as Council on the 24th of February last year, you approved £6.750 million of service reduction measures. And at paragraph 10, you can see that there are two of these options totalling £71,000, which services advise are unlikely to be met this year. And the alternative options will be found within those service budgets to compensate for that £71,000. Paragraph 11 takes us to the revenue budget by service, and for education notes that the overspend is reduced from £3.9 million to £2.6 million after the service has reviewed spending plans, utilised non-recurring funding, and also benefited from the £500,000 transfer as part of the service review. The service itself, however, continues to experience pressures in early years in special education, with early years anticipated to end the year just over £1 million overspent, which, after recognising that this budget carried forward an overspend of £1 million from last year, shows that costs are being held in advance of the service concluding the full best value service review, which is in progress and will report to Cabinet in due course. The service is also experiencing significant pressures in additional support for learning, with this budget anticipated to overspend by around £3 million, £2 million relating to transport costs, and as you're aware, members, colleagues are also undertaking a review of transport within this review, with this review being brought back to you in due course. Within communities and economy, the end of year projection is an overspend of around £380,000, which is broadly in line with the Q2 figure, after receiving the support from the balances review. Although the service recognises underspends in economic growth, in financial and facilities and property management, and in health and safety, there continues to be a significant pressure within waste management of around £1 million. And again, members, you'll be aware that a review of the full waste management arrangements is being progressed by the Head of Housing and Communities, and that review will be brought back to members once concluded. And finally, in this section, we recognise the budget pressures being experienced by Ayrshire Roads Alliance, specifically in relation to primary and secondary school transport, which is anticipated to end the year around £500,000 over budget. Paragraph 16 notes the position in terms of health and social care, recognising a projected overspend of around £2.8 million relating predominantly to significant pressures within community care as the service continues to experience legacy issues from the pandemic, alongside significant pressures at care at home and in the self-directed support budgets. The Integration Joint Board approved a financial recovery plan last December to bring the budget back online, and that recovery plan is being progressed by the Chief Officer and by his management team. Paragraphs 18 and 19 note the works taking place at 12 to 16 Glazenock Street, Cumnock, and note the challenges within this capital project, which have led to costs exceeding the tender by around £120,000. Members are asked to approve that funds be allocated from the Economic Regeneration Development Fund capital budget in order to meet these costs. Chair, the people section, health and safety, risk management are covered in more detail later, and I'm happy to stop there and take any questions.
Thanks, Joe. Thanks for the report. That's just a kind of small, it's a significant question, but in terms of, we've got an overspend in transport. I know that that was reported to the Health Board earlier in the week, that the Health Board are all having a significant issues in terms of patient transport overspend. I think, and I think they acknowledge there's a possibility of more use of community transport and stuff like that. obviously there's maybe a crossover there, and it's maybe something we might be worth bringing to the community planning partnership as a matter of urgency to address some of these issues. I wonder if we could maybe do that as a kind of action note for today's meeting.
Just picking up on that point, Chair, I had direct contact from the Director of Finance and the NHS board just asking about community transport, recognising some of the good work we've done previously about how we've tackled some of the transport issues, just asking to be put in contact to start to have those conversations. So we provided the relevant contact details. So hopefully that's just in the last couple of weeks. Hopefully that conversation has now started to allow them to bottom out whether or not there is anything there that we can start to take forward more in a better sort of joined up way, I suppose. But yeah, happy to pick up those conversations as they start to emerge.
Thanks, Eddie.
Thanks, Chair. I suppose in a related issue, at the Community Planning and Chief Officers Group, we had a discussion around the range of pressures across different community planning partners. And one of the actions that we agreed was to look at where there are, like common stresses. A particular one that came up was around public sector estate, working across them all, and indeed, working together around that. And it's something that Andrew's going to pick up for us and linking to, like colleagues in health, police, etc., to actually look right across the public sector. It's the purpose of community planning. So transport is another one that adds into that as well. And it's some of the types of things that we need to look at when we're under pressure. So are our partners. How can we work better together to actually address these pressures?
Thanks, Ed. That's helpful. I see a hand up. I don't know whose it is. Maureen.
Thank you very much. Just a couple of questions. One, I'll start off with, first of all, in terms of Glaisnock Street. Obviously, there has been a considerable delay in relation to actually finalising and addressing this. Are we anticipating that we are now going to be able to move forward, and this will be the last that we will see a report of this nature in relation to the work that's required at Glaisnock Street? That's question one.
Simon, sorry.
Yeah, thanks through you, Chair. Yeah, we would hope, Councillor Mackay, that this would be the last time we would come back with a report. As detailed in the paragraphs there, it explains about the issues that occurred at the end of the demolition contract when material came down at the adjoining building, and engineers subsequently identified historical inherent deficiencies in that building, and we were required to introduce shoring to support it and remedial works to make it safe again. And it's around about those shoring works and inspection that these costs have occurred. That shoring's all removed now, the remedial works are completed, and we're moving forward with the next phase of the overall project there, which is to construct a new gable wall where the gap site is at the former 14 to 16 Glaisnock Street, as had always been planned, and then following that, the extension of the car park from Ayr Road at the back through into the gap space. So, I would hope we've addressed all these unforeseen remedial works that need to be done. Thanks, Chair.
Okay, thank you for that. I mean, I am horrified.
Just before Mitchell wants to come in on that one too. Sorry.
Yeah. It was just to clarify, members will recall we came before the Cabinet. This isn't further additional costs on top of what was previously reported. This is the final outturn from phase one. I was just talking to Simon about this, as it happens, for a different interest just before Cabinet. So as Simon's indicated, round one was the urgently required works when we found the facade was coming away from the ownerless building. And members will recall the paper by which we got authority to acquire the building, fix the building. It's the additional cost from the stoneworks, etc., that were required. It was noted at the time that additional funding would be required, and this is the final outturn. It's not another round of additional funding. It's simply putting a figure to the final outturn. The actual first phase of works that Simon's identified were concluded last June. They have been concluded. The next stage, as we've said, is the gable end. And the intention, as is indicated in the report, just for members' benefit, is quite simply we are still in discussion with prospective tenants, and the aspiration is when the gable end works are done, there's no point putting tenants in when those works are to be concluded in the second contract, but we're aiming to align, and when the works to the gable end are concluded, the hope would be we have a tenant ready to go in with a licence, and then we have a property that's fully refurbed, etc., made safe and secure, and we can sell with a sitting tenant at the optimum price on the market or value in the market. So it's not that it's crept further. This is the final outturn and just looking for that formal confirmation and allocation of the additional sums. But we acquired the building at no cost, and the last time it sold before all these works were carried out, I think it was around £200,000 to £310,000. So there's a value in the building that will then be put back into the capital funds to compensate for the funding being required just now. So we would hope to approximately break even, depending on what the market yields when we go to market, and preferably with a sitting tenant, but they're ongoing negotiations just now.
Thanks, David. Maureen, you had another point to come?
Yeah, thanks very much. No, I just wanted to come in to say I'm absolutely horrified as to how long this has actually taken for us to progress. Again, you know, I'm hearing what David's saying to us, and to get to a conclusion, and with that fact that we are no longer talking about this site, would be a good and positive outcome for us. I just hope we achieve that very soon. If I wanted to come back in, please, it is to pick up the points at paragraph 15, and that is in relation to the primary and secondary school transport costs. I'm very mindful of the time of year that we are in. I'm sure members will remember that when this
Maureen, you froze. I don't know if you can hear me. I don't know if it's the time of year.
I would take questions for other members.
Maureen,
when are we going to get this to come forward?
Maureen, we didn't get that because you froze during that.
Yep. Sorry, it was to ask. We're very much at the stage where we're almost at half term. It will be of real concern, I'm sure, to parents that the questions of school transport are still not settled in the longer term. So when are we going to have this report, and when are we going to be in a position to be able to get to a settled position in relation to school transport?
Who's David? Kevin, sorry.
Through you, Chair, I intend bringing a report to Cabinet in April on progress in school transport. I met with Stagecoach yesterday. They are going to carry out a trial. However, we have to give 10 weeks notice to the Traffic Commissioner before we carry out that trial. So the trial is proposed to be carried out in May of this year. The report in April will give a full detail of where we are with school transport, result of consultation, details of the trial, and costs around active travel routes. And then in June, we will bring another paper back to give details of the result of Stagecoach trial. And the intention would be between June and Christmas of 2024, we would carry out all the works required in terms of crossing points, filling in the gaps in some of the active travel routes, with a paper in December to give 6 months notice that we would propose that school transport is amended from the 1st of August 2025, or the school term starting in August 2025. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thanks, Kevin. Maureen, you want to come back on that point, Kevin's answer?
No, thank you. I think that is detail that we didn't have, and I'm glad that we now have that in open session. Thank you very much.
Okay, thanks. Anybody else? Okay, Joe, back to the next.
Thank you, Chair. Members, the revenue section of the accompanying report begins on page 12. It shows the £2.6 million overspend within education, and provides more detail around the position in respect of early years, and also in relation to AS, additional support for learning. noting that the projected overspend has increased since the previous report, with the challenges within this budget relating to transport costs being around £2 million overspent due to the increase both in the number of children as well as additional £1 million for ASN travel pressures for staffing pressures too. In respect of finance and ICT and governance, people and culture and corporate support, we see underspends across these services as they seek to implement their service redesign proposals previously agreed by Cabinet and recruit staff to necessary roles. Community and economy begins on page 13 and notes here that in respect of Ayrshire Roads Alliance, the service shows an almost break-even position with a slight overspend of £28,000. But as you know, members, this is masking some real challenges in the budget, especially in terms of primary and secondary transport, and a shortfall in parking income of around £400,000, all of which is being offset by savings in staff costs to bring the budget back online. And I'm grateful to Kevin and to colleagues in ARA for their work in seeking to balance the budget. Within housing and communities, we note that the service is likely to end the year around £600,000 overspent, and this is predominantly due to additional pressures within waste management of around £1 million, with the service taking the opportunity to review all budgets, including the allocation of balances, to reduce the overspend to its current level. In wellbeing, as noted earlier, the financial recovery plan was approved in December with the aim of recovering the projected overspend of £2.8 million. However, that figure masks a whole number of issues. Within the analysis on page 14, we can see overspends now with placements, which, although shown as £180,000 overspent, is actually £700,000 overspent. But the service have taken the opportunity to use its own balances to bring that overspend down to the £180,000 level. The significant pressure remains within community care, where the service is expected to overspend by £3.7 million. Noting that all previous COVID-19 temporary funding has been fully utilised. And as noted in previous reports, the service is seeing overspends in older services of around £1.8 million, mainly due to community care staffing costs, an overspend of around £500,000 in physical disabilities budget, with learning disabilities budget also expected to end the year around £1.5 million over budget. In previous East Stage Performance members, I've made mention of the fact that the impact of COVID and the pandemic on services has been severe, and how the legacy of that pandemic remains, and it remains at large within the wellbeing budget, which is being severely impacted by both the impact and aftermath of COVID-19, and more importantly, the rising service demands and needs expectations that have arisen from it. At the bottom of page 14, we note the pressures the council is also facing corporately in terms of council tax reduction and that support we give to households. We're seeing a large increase in applications, and we anticipate that this budget will overspend £1 million more than the grant we received to pay out council tax reduction from the government. In respect of the housing revenue account, we see the HRA expected to end the year around £600,000 underspent, with favourable arrangements in respect of additional rent income, a saving on debt charges, and less cost pressures in favourable outturns in respect of the void rent loss budget. Chair, recognise that's a fair chunk of information, and I'm happy to stop there before moving on to People Equity Fund.
Thanks, Joe. Just for me, just one of the pressures that you mentioned there is community care, and you mentioned the pressures from learning disabilities and self-directed support there, and and we know from increasing school rolls and pressure that we know that the number of people being diagnosed, that population is growing quite exponentially. Are we satisfied that we're getting enough resources from government to give these people adequate support? And is there anything else we can do to put some pressure on to make sure that we do? Craig?
So we've had several discussions about this, probably at IJB and I think in this chamber as well, at various times round about, particularly the increased number of both children, young people and adults as well, seeking ADHD in particular, sort of neurodiverse diagnoses, etc. And it is really challenging just now. So there's been a lot of work done by North Ayrshire, who are the lead partner around about these services, particularly in relation to CAMS and how they can protect and make sure that CAMS deliver a really good service. The flip side of that is that CAMS now deal with some of the acute mental health, which means they don't have the capacity to deal with some of those other areas that we're talking about here. So there's been a couple of teams taking work forward, one round about children's services, one round about adult services, and particularly in relation to ADHD and the wider neurodiverse sort of population. That work's not yet complete, but what it is identifying is the opportunity to deliver those services in a different way. However, there will be a cost associated with it, and at this point in time there's no additional funding being provided by anybody to fund any of that work. So whatever we put in place around about that will have to be funded locally by our own sort of services, but clearly given the financial envelope that we're operating within, that means making savings elsewhere in order to be able to invest in that particular area. But say that the work's not yet complete. It's due to report back in probably the next couple of months. Thereafter, we can anticipate reports coming through into the IJB and beyond, identifying what those opportunities start to look like. But as I say, the funding round about it, the funding that's available just now is extremely challenging. But we do know that the expectations and the number of people looking for support and diagnosis, etc., is increasing almost on a daily basis, and as a really challenging environment.
Thanks, Craig. That's helpful, and I think we need to continue to look at that and just give as much support as we can to that community. Members, Maureen.
Apologies, just I hadn't taken down the hand. Sorry.
Thanks, Maureen. Graham.
Thanks, Doug. This is the kind of first public time opportunity I've had to thank Greener Communities, NARA, for the work they've done during the two storms that came back to back. It was Jocelyn and Ayrshire with significant flooding and storm damage. I know that the team put in a lot of hours in the command centre, and I'd just like to thank them for the clean-up job they've done.
Thanks, Graham. I think that's appreciated, and we'll pass that to the staff. We know they were out just beyond the call of duty as usual, but that's just really absolutely grateful for that. Jim?
Thanks. George, about the with placements and that figure around about the 707 for the external residence placement. Is that offset in any way from, do we accommodate external placements within East Ayrshire other authorities?
Not typically, no. In terms of the placements that we have, it's typically young people who we don't have the ability or the resources to manage internally. There's a number of very specialist providers around the country that we place into. They are typically privately run, not exclusively, but typically privately run, and we place into there. But in terms of us, what we operate within our own health and social care partnership premises, no, we don't typically have anything that's out with placements into the authority, if that makes sense.
Thanks, Craig. Anyone else? Neil?
Yeah, thanks very much. It's just something that Joe didn't touch on in his report. It was the health and safety aspect. Just want to thank David Dorrans and his team in regard to community defibrillators. Myself and my ward colleague Graham Barton was down at Scott Ellis playing fields last week, where another one of the defibrillators was put at the Scouts Hall. So that's really positive. I just want to thank the team. Also, we had a council conversation earlier on this week in regard to wellbeing, and through that conversation, it was just highlighted how important kind of reaching out when you are struggling through the Here to Listen, suicide prevention, or any of the other wellbeing supports that we have, and that's largely down to the health and safety and wellbeing teams. So again, great thanks to them and for the training that they provide to our staff and community groups and anybody who wants to help people when they are really struggling.
Thanks, Neil. I think that's really important. We really appreciate the work that's been doing there. Suicide awareness training, a number of the members have taken that up as well. We're pleased to see that, as well as staff, and that's great to see that as well. And also the CPR training as well. Big numbers there That's really good. I'd like to thank David and his team for that one. Anybody else? Okay, carry on, Joe.
Thank you, Chair. Pupil Equity Fund begins on page 18. It shows the allocation to each school directly from the Scottish Government and the plans each head teacher has for their allocation. It shows the commitments and the costs to date, along with the projected spend by head teachers, both in terms of spend to 31st of March and spend to the end of the academic year in June. Chair, with your approval, if I can just continue and go on to alternative delivery models, begins on page 21. Shows that Ayrshire Roads Alliance is expected to end the year £700,000 overspent, but it's important to note that the strategic delivery element and also the East Ayrshire local delivery element will underspend by £600,000 and £17,000 respectively. However, the local delivery South Ayrshire element of the Alliance is expected to end the year £1.4 million overspent, noting a loss of parking income, a loss of income from capital works, overspends in street lighting, energy costs, as well as additional costs for overtime and the like. The ARA capital budgets are listed in the table, and in respect of bridges, we note the ongoing work with new projects being designed, but we also note the challenges faced by the service in respect of delays caused by land acquisitions and discussions taking place with SEPA. In the last East Ayrshire Performance Report, I made mention of the new Cumnock flood scheme, and a further update is provided today. However, we acknowledge the challenges within the scheme and the discussions that are taking place between the head of Ayrshire Roads Alliance and the Council's monitoring officer and the contractor in respect to the contract dispute and the potential claim that will likely come to the Council. And I will provide more information on that in subsequent reports. This section also highlights the work being undertaken at Kilmarnock Bus Station, noting that Phase 3 works commenced in January last year, and whilst the project was originally anticipated to run for 38 weeks, there were delays due to material shortages. Funding for this project has been provided by SPT for the 2023-2024 financial year to support the project. However, given the challenges faced by SPT, particularly in relation to their capital budget for next year, in the last week, colleagues at SPT have intimated to councils that funding that was allocated this year must be fully utilised by 31st of March, and there is a substantial risk that any works that are not completed by this date will risk losing the remaining element of any SPT funding. Members, as you expect, with the timescale is a very live issue, and colleagues in Ayrshire Roads Alliance, supported by colleagues from across the council, are dealing to maximise the amount that we can put into the claim as at the 31st of March. Chair, I'm happy to stop there before handing across to Simon for capital.
Thanks, John. I mean, that is a concern in terms of, we know the pressures that's on the SPT budget. You know, just, is there any kind of ballpark figures and, you know, much as, you know, is left unallocated, you know, unspent or unallocated, or, you know, and what the kind of scale of the issue is? Because we can see, I mean, the bit that's been completed so far looks really good, you know, and it'd be a pity, just a great project, just if it can't be completed. If we could ask that question first of all, Simon.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. So we've been making inquiries, as Joe said, just in the recent few days around about this, as the issue's just arisen. It would appear there's potentially around about £400,000 or £500,000 of works that might be post the end of this financial year. Although, again, as Joe said, we're pushing the contractor to maximise the amount of spend before the end of the financial year. But that's the current position just now. Thanks.
The other question I had in terms of clarity, I know there's been the Green Street car parks. There's been an issue about Boundary Wall. Just kind of, and I know there's a bit, particularly with the popularity of the new Above Adventure facility, there's a bit of pressure in you know, the roads round about there, particularly at the weekends, for residents as well as other business. Do you know any outcome of the completion date, or any kind of other kind of information that would be useful?
Through you, Chair, Green Street Car Park, colleagues in facilities and property management are progressing the tender documents for the demolition of the attached building to the car park, and I have officers in our team progressing the car park design. The anticipated start date would be summer 2024 for Green Street Car Park. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, the sooner the better. Okay, members, any other points or questions? Okay. Maureen. Right, Maureen.
Much again, and it is in relation to alternative delivery model. I know Joe hasn't had anything to say in relation to Ayrshire Leisure Trust. It is a proposal that I'd like to make in relation to Cabinet. I know Cabinet has already agreed that we would have a delegation from Auchinleck Leisure who wish to come forward to speak to Cabinet. And what I am asking is, would it be possible prior to that taking place if we could arrange a site visit?
I know there's a report coming hopefully next week. Richard, do you want to come in?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Mackay. Yes, a report coming next week to Cabinet, and Blair and myself happy to come to group meetings in advance of that. Members wish to have a site visit, we'd be more than happy to work with you in that regard and facilitate that in advance of the meeting. Through you, Chair. Thank you.
Okay, members. David, I don't believe there's any rules if you'd advise us, but it's just a matter for Cabinet to decide whether
There's neither any process in place, but equally there would be no impediment. As members know, in relation to the Planning Committee, this is a regular feature, and indeed it's encouraged. But that's for the purpose of the Planning Committee. All I would say is if Cabinet members wish to adopt that approach and have a site visit, then clearly we will arrange that and seek to facilitate that between now and the report coming on the 14th. If that's a decision of Cabinet, there's no reason not to do it. It's really a matter for individual members whether or not they think that a site visit, as opposed to the current state of knowledge they have of the premises, will add value. But we're happy to facilitate it for any member that wishes to partake.
Okay, we'll arrange that. I don't see any issues with that. If members want, if you're not aware of the facility, we can arrange a site visit. Makes a bit of sense if they're doing that at the same time. Okay, we can agree to that. And Joe.
Sorry, Chair, I was too eager to pass across to Simon and realised I'd forgotten to pass out some of the other information in terms of alternative delivery models and Treasury, so forgive me. Just to note that in terms of Leisure Trust, we're showing a slight overspend, but as you would imagine, colleagues at the Trust are taking active steps to bring the budget back into line. One thing I would note to members today is that the financial information and outcomes arising from the Starry Night event is not in this report yet, still being compiled by the Trust, and it'll be included in the future the next East Ayrshire Performance Report. And Treasury is on page 25. Members, you know this tends to show the debt and the investments that we have. We've got around £450 million of debt with the Public Works Loan Board and around £22 million of investments. As you would expect, it's that time of year, members, when we bring the three reports, capital, the revenue budget and the Treasury to you. As you would expect, the management of our debt portfolio is an important part of the Treasury function and aligned to that capital report, which will be brought before you at the end of the month. We are currently assessing what available headroom is available for taking further debt. It will be advised and intimated to members and to Council later this month and will be alongside both that capital report and the Treasury report. But an important point just to say, members, in terms of that limit you set in February and the impact of that and other matters that are we're reflecting on before we bring those reports to you in a few weeks' time. So, Chair, at this time I am happy to stop there before handing across to Simon.
Thanks, Joe. I think that to have those reports in front of us, we know the interest rate is quite volatile at the moment. A concern just people as individuals, but also corporately, is a concern to as a council. So we'll look forward to having those reports in front of us. Members, any other comments or questions? Okay, and Simon, you're next with the capital.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. As Joe's mentioned and as noted at paragraph 17 in the covering report, the capital programme is facing significant financial challenges due to the current economic climate. The programme continues to be closely monitored, and a detailed review of affordability and prioritisation is currently being undertaken across all projects to ensure they align with strategic priorities and essential needs. An update will be provided as part of the annual capital investment programme report, due to be submitted to Cabinet at the end of February. As usual, without going through the report in great detail, if I could provide an update on a selection of projects in relation to their stage of development. Starting with completed projects, the SHIP housing development at Kilmarnock Road, Mauchline, was handed over in November, and tenants are in the process of moving into their new homes. And the refurbishment of the Ayr Road depot in Cumnock has also recently been completed and handed over. There's approximately £28 million of construction contracts on site, which include the St Sophia's Primary School Enerfit refurbishment, which started on the 15th of January, and the Galston office and library, which also started in January. The new build Dunlop Early Childhood Centre is ongoing, with external envelope works largely complete and internal fit-out works carrying on, and the SHIP programme development at Kennedy Drive, Kilmarnock, with works progressing to programme. Projects at detailed design stage include the Doon Valley Community Campus, where a planning application was submitted in November. Whilst the application is subject to a SEPA objection around about flood risk, the project team have developed a planning strategy that they believe offers an appropriate counterbalance to these challenges. The project also continues to face financial pressures around market volatility and inflation, and discussions have been ongoing with the main project funders. At Stuart Academy, designs for the extension and refurbishment are currently being reviewed around future growth projections and the essential needs of the project. And projects at the earlier stage of development include the Cultural Kilmarnock project, where design development at REBA Stage 3 is ongoing. However, the project faces challenges aligning with the main funders' programme timescales. With the Ayrshire Innovation Park at Moorfield as part of the Ayrshire Growth Deal, design works ongoing through REBA Stage 2 in consultation with key stakeholders. Thank you, Chair. That's just a brief update on a selection of projects, but happy to take any questions on these or indeed any others.
Thanks, Sam. Can I maybe ask just about the stabilisation next to the AAA? I know it's maybe something I've already written to the broader issue in terms of flooding and matters to the Minister and to the new chair of SEPA. It's probably possibly something we could add to the agenda if we do get that meeting. But can you just maybe highlight just what the key issues are?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. So there's been very detailed design work ongoing with consultants around about a solution to stabilise the banking. I should say, since this was first identified, there's been sort of telltales and monitoring being undertaken on a regular basis to ensure that it's not deteriorating to an unsafe, dangerous level, which it isn't. It's a complex design in the river to come up with a solution to stabilise these banks, and we have now identified what that design option will be. So we're working through the sort of pre-planning process with that in consultation with SEPA and the Rivers Trust, and there's various factors we need to take into account around about wildlife and the fish spawning season in the river. So I don't have an accurate timescale on just when we might be able to undertake those, but we're working through that detailed design now to then move it to the planning stage.
Thanks, Simon. That's helpful. Drew?
Thanks, Chair. I would just like to recognise Simon and Alistair and all the team's hard work on the Doon Valley campus. It's not been an easy one. There have been a lot of challenges. The inflationary prices, as Simon says there, and the SEPA, the NPF4 flood risk things. But I'm glad to see that they're back on track now for to get started in autumn 24 and completion for 26. So I'm looking forward to a new school in the Doon Valley. Thanks.
Thanks, Drew. Okay. Anyone else? No. Who's that? David. All right, yeah. So everything for Simon, yeah.
Amanda, that's
Seems like it. Oh, my wee bit of paper says David, so it's thrown us here. Amanda.
Thanks, Chair. Morning, members. The people pages within the summary report start on page 32, with the statistics for absence being in page 33, noting that there's an increase in the number of employees that were absent in the same period last year. There were less work days lost, therefore, has resulted in a reduction of 0.47 days lost per employee. Tables 2 and 3 note the employees being counted. Sorry. At tables 2 and 3, please note that the employees could be counted in multiple times, therefore different numbers from table 1. This is where an employee has multiple absences within the period. Page 34 shows with occupational health activity, noting that there's been an increase of 209 occupational health appointments, 47 early interventions and 40 physio appointments compared to the same period last year. This would be expected due to the high levels of absence over the year. On page 34, disciplinary activity, noting there were 6 other outcomes and 2 still under consideration. The 6 other outcomes, 4 of the individuals resigned just prior to the hearing, and the other 2 were no further action due to lack of evidence. The 2 under consideration, one's now been closed off with no further action, and the other one is still being considered. On page 35, members will note that the headcount across the council has increased compared to the same period last year by 74 or 1%, the biggest increase being in permanent employees within the Health and Social Care Partnership. Page 35-36, developing our young workforce. There's been an increase in the total number of young people by 12 compared to the same period last year. However, there's a decrease in the number of modern apprentices. On page 36, you will see the breakdown of the Jobs and Training Fund, and noting that within the council to date we've recruited 140 people so far, which is broken down as 109 modern apprentices, 2 graduate interns and 2 graduate apprentices, and 29 graduate interns. In addition, there's been 33 apprentices and 3 graduate interns employed to local businesses, which is a total of 176 training roles out of the possible 200. We'd also note that within the 140 of the employees within the council, 29 have now moved on to positive destinations, which is either permanent employment within the council or out with the council. We're currently looking at the bids for 24-25 and we'll progress them as appropriate. Recruitment is on page 36, noting that we continue to have hard-to-fill posts, particularly within health and social care and ARA, some within education and wider environmental health, etc. We continue to work with the services to find solutions going forward. Payroll activity is detailed on page 37. And their communications overview on page 38, which details the activities and campaigns, and it shows a slight increase in the figures compared to the last period, and that's due to the holiday period for the schools in the last one. ODE performance is on page 38 and 39. This has been expanded to give members a bit more information, including the online induction module, leadership programmes, mentoring framework and FaceTime engagement, noting that the figures could be better for the induction, and we continue to work with the services to ensure that this is increased, and also noting that the FaceTime is currently sitting at 38%, which would never be at 100% just with the rolling year, but obviously there's room for improvement there, and the OD partners are working with heads of service to get that figure improved. Happy to stop there and take any questions. Thanks.
Thanks, Amanda. That's a significant figure in terms of working days lost, and just like to thank the staff and yourself, your own section for all your hard work there, Amanda. Members, any comments or questions? Maureen?
Thank you again. Amanda, it is in relation to on page 37, and it's under the employees leaving the council. And it talks about community care officers within social care partnership and 10 resignations from the group within that period. Now, I very recently sat and in an audit committee for the IGIB and was told that we were recruiting well in relation to community care. There was great interest in coming to work with us to the extent that we had actually ceased to recruit. Could you give me some balance, please, on these resignations and the stated position in relation to recruiting?
Thanks, Maureen. Amanda?
Thank you. So exactly right there, you did describe it exactly how it is. I don't have the complete figures for the amount of appointments there were to community care officers in that same period, but it way outweighs the number of resignations. So we have got to a point, we've been doing every 3 weeks recruitment drives, I think is the best way of calling it, in the communities, and we're putting up all the posters locally, and we're communicating that way, and we're doing it as recruitment drives. As I say, people come in, fill in the application form, they then go through to the shortlisting and the actual interview process on the days to support individuals, and also if they don't meet the shortlist, so that we can talk to folk about why they don't meet the shortlist, etc., and help them to improve for the future. So that has proved very successful, that we are now at a point that we have paused that recruitment. There obviously is, as I say, 10 that's left within that period. However, they're not for any one specific reason. They're just general retirements, ill health, etc. But I can get you the breakdown of the detail and send it through to you.
Thank you very much, Amanda. I think that's very encouraging, because I think when we see that sort of 10 resignations within that period, without that background and without knowing how active our recruitment is, that would be a concern. So thank you for that.
Yeah, that's certainly helpful. Okay, now to David now.
Thanks, Chair, and good morning, members. The report covers periods 7 to 9, and as before, I could just draw members' attention to top of page 41 of the summary report. It will be noted that the number of non-reportable incidents to health and safety has increased by 187 when we compare the same page last year, while the incidents reportable to HSE have decreased by 16. As you would imagine, Chair, I monitor all of these incidents regularly, and if I could take the reportable incidents first, 5 of those were related to occupational disease as we were coming out of the COVID pandemic, but looking at the rest, I can't see any discernible pattern. There's no peak in any of the incident categories, and consequently there's no reason for that drop. It's just a fluctuation. Looking at the non-reportable incidents, Chair, yet again, as I've reported to Cabinet previously, this is mainly due to dysregulated behaviours, and that's across all 3 reporting periods. But as you would imagine, all the control measures that we can practically put in place, we are putting in place to try and keep those numbers as low as we possibly can. Paragraphs 24 to 26 of the current report outlines the various positive health, safety and wellbeing indicators. And as previous reports, Chair, if I could just highlight the work under Here to Listen. That's a constantly moving feast as we continue to train more people. And at this point in time, we've trained 635 people. We've organised courses each month throughout this year. The course last month was full, February's is full, March is full, and the other courses are starting to fill up rapidly. And as I said before at this meeting, Chair, these courses are open to everyone, and I would encourage people to take part where they can. Moving to the number of interventions, as we stand just now, 231 interventions have been taking place, Chair, by the people who have been trained, and that's an increase of 20 interventions since the last report to this group. If I can move to the Community Defibrillator Initiative, it continues to progress well. We now had equipment totaling a value of over £90,000 donated, and we've also delivered 51 defibrillators and cabinets to community groups across East Ayrshire, and we've got a further 4 to be issued in the coming weeks. I've also recently taken delivery of another 5, so I'm actively encouraging more applications to come through. And in line with our work with Scottish Fire and Rescue, we've currently trained 839 people in CPR and defibrillator skills, and we continue to roll out that training to community groups as part of this initiative. So that covers the report, Chair, and I'd be happy to take any questions.
Thanks. I think the earlier report understates just how much you're doing. That's possible we could end up with 60 defibrillators and a significant amount of staff trained to use them, and other people. Graham.
Thanks. It's just to ask David about the manual handling training, how often we do that, because when you look back to Amanda's report, there's quite a high absence level with musculoskeletal. We should see how often we're training our staff on manual handling to try and reduce that.
Through you, Chair, I think it's important before I answer that question to give a bit of context around the figures, because in terms of workplace manual handling, the figures are actually really low. It accounts for approximately about 2% of the incidents that we actually get through each year, so we don't see a great deal of manual handling incidents coming through to health and safety in terms of, if you like, workplace accidents. Taking that aside, though, we do deliver manual handling training. We delivered manual handling training as part of WorkSafe, for example, to staff within HAS in the WorkSafe programme last year. And we also have a manual handling course that we deliver as services apply for that course and staff required to be trained. In fact, we're going to be training colleagues up at Waste Management fairly shortly in manual handling.
And thanks very much, David, for that information. Thank you.
Amanda.
Yep, just to add to that, Health and Social Care Partnership have got their own team that provide training on an ongoing basis. It's part of the induction for all community care officers, etc. So there is quite significant amounts of training do happen.
Neil. Seems to be frozen again, Maureen.
Sorry, it is to ask the question to say to David, well done in relation to the defibrillators. An additional line that I'm going to suggest in terms of our ongoing knowledge about the defibrillators would be to ask if it's possible, and for David to suggest an appropriate reporting period for that on the usage of the defibrillators. It's great that they're there. We would like some feedback on how much they're actually being used. That would be helpful.
David?
We try as much as we can through you, Chair, to get reports back. And obviously, as we're handing the equipment over, it's going to community groups and clubs who then take full guardianship of that equipment as part of the initiative. However, at the handover point, we do ask community groups and clubs that if the equipment is used, that they notify us that it's being used as well, so that we can keep a track of that. To this point, I've been notified of 2 having been used, but as I said, it's down to the groups and clubs to actually notify us, and as they tell us about it, then I'll be happy to bring it to the future cabinet reports.
Thanks very much, David, for that. Okay.
Would it be appropriate for that to then be on an annual basis that comes back to us?
Seems reasonable. Yeah, David. Yeah. Okay, an annual report on that. That seems helpful. Okay, Joe.
Thank you, Chair. Members, business briefings begin on page 45. They contain a number of indicators that services would like to draw to your attention. In terms of the first set, we can see that benefits processing is slightly below target, and we are above target, rather. We are seeing very conscious efforts being made by the team to deal with an increase in council tax reduction applications. We see the timescales for household planning applications lengthened slightly, although the non-household category remains well ahead of target. And over the page, the Head of Education and Chief Education Officer would like to highlight the achievement of Curriculum for Excellence levels, ASO results, for 2022-23 that were published by the government in December last year. And you will see that East Ayrshire results are extremely positive, with notable improvements made across a whole number and range of stages. This part also provides details of the Education Scotland visit to SL33 Community Learning and Development on the 19th of December to undertake a Community Learning and Development Progress visit, with their report identifying SL33 as making a significant contribution to supporting young people into positive destinations and specified as practice worth sharing more widely. The full report, members, is available at the link on page 47. And within communities and economy, we continue to see really positive messages around the percentage of tenancy sustained, and also in terms of the rent lost due to properties being empty, and the substantial and incredible work being undertaken by colleagues across that division, including in housing and communities. We note that the factoring service has completed 98 block inspections, required 223 inspections overall. The remaining surveys will be scheduled to be carried out this financial year. And this part of the briefing also shows the jobs and training and fund employability support for apprentices and internships by the private sector, and the figures there, again, members, are hugely encouraging. And within wellbeing, we see the usual indicators, noting that the standard hospital delayed discharge still at 0, with narrative provided around delayed discharge bed days and information around the number of looked after and accommodated children. Chair, if it's possible, I'll move on to complaints. On page 52 shows that 26 complaints were received, a further 8 carried forward, slightly down from the same quarter last year. The performance for these complaints in terms of stage 1 and stage 2 and the time taken to determine is shown at the bottom of page 52, and we can see that of the 28 complaints closed at quarter 3, 16 had improvement actions associated with them, and the services are actively taking these forward in order to improve service delivery and overall complaints handling. The risks begin on page 55. The corporate risk register was reviewed by the council management team on the 31st of January, and for this quarter 2 report there's been no new risks added, nor have any risks had their priority status changed. In terms of the economic climate, the risk register notes the Scottish Government's financial settlement to councils that was received on the 21st of December. That settlement has widened our budget gap for next year by a further £2.7 million. And as you would imagine, from the point of receipt and calculation of the settlement to today and beyond, we are actively seeking, both as a service in finance and ICT, but as a wider council management team, to identify all available options to try and reduce that gap. But in doing so, and recognising the work being done in the council, we are also taking steps via COSLA to highlight the real issues for the council going forward. Also noting at risk 1B income levels, that some of the income levels are taking much longer to recover, and again the Scottish Welfare Fund continuing to feel strain within that budget line too. And just in terms of risk 2B, the Ayrshire growth deal, to let members know that the annual conversation with both governments took place last week in North Ayrshire. The work, it was a very positive meeting with both sets of governments, and both governments highlighted the importance of the Ayrshire growth deal and helpfully agreed to work with specific councils and specific senior responsible officers, or SROs, in the deal to provide fast-track guidance on any project changes, so that projects can reach the FBC stage, the final business case stage, work can commence, and that £255 million of funding for the Ayrshire growth deal can be drawn down by the relevant councils. Chair, that concludes East Ayrshire Performance Report. Happy to take any questions, but noting that the recommendations for Cabinet today are on paragraph 3 on page 3. Thank you.
Thanks, Joe. Just to echo some of your points here in terms of the budget gap, and the special leaders meetings being called later on this week, just to address some of these issues if we can through COSLA, and we'll continue to work hard to lobby where we can to address that gap nationally and wherever we have to go. Sorry, Elaine.
Thank you, Chair. I was just wondering if we could have a status update on SL 66, and if it's agreeable, could we consider a future visit to the facility once it's available?
Thanks, pass over to Linda.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Cowan. Delighted to report SL 66 is now open. There was a few snagging issues that held us up slightly, but we now have SL 66 open in Netherthird. So I'm going up for a visit next week, and certainly I'm quite sure we can arrange to have yourself and any other elected members that want to see the new resource there up to have a look. So yeah, delighted to report that's now open.
Thanks, Lyndon. Hopefully your cold gets better by that time, Elaine, and you can make it. Okay. Bring Eddie in about risk as well here.
Thanks, Leader. It's just, like Joe mentioned, that, the corporate risk register is brought to you, and it's brought to you through this format. One of the focus that myself and the management team have had is about the range of pressures that we're experiencing as a council. We're experiencing right down at service level, and how that impacts then overall to the council as a corporate level. So we've put a dedicated resource through the corporate support team to actually help us with that, and the Chief Internal Auditor's also been looking across the country at different models of how we escalate risks from service risks through to the corporate risks. So everything we do, we've been speaking about in terms of resources, in terms of people, we need to look at, and we're having that overall review of how we make sure these things are linked together. I mean, usually we talk about risk in terms of issues around finance, but as you know, there are risks around availability of people. There are risks too around demography and the shifts of demography, and we need to actually look at how all that ties together. So what we're looking at, rather than, it feels to me, although these are important risks, they're the same risks that come to us every time we bring East Ayrshire Performs, and we'll look about how do we tie that together to the actual operations of the council, as well as the strategic external risks to us as well. So it's something that we're closely looking at just now, and I think it will help explain some of the difficult decisions that, and recommendations that we have to make to you going forward, if we can balance that with the risks.
I think that's really helpful, Eddie. I think we really need to look at the demography really hard, just which way it's going, and lobby hard to make sure some of these issues, because it does seem local authorities that have that high degrees of deprivation are being disadvantaged, which is quite alarming. But I think we need to try and understand it more, and to present our case to address that. Okay, that's East Ayrshire Performs. Can we agree the recommendations? Okay. Go back into the normal running order and go to item 4, which is the Gaelic language plan. And Alia, who's taking it? Ian. Oh, sorry. Maureen.
Sorry, it was just to ask, have we agreed a site visit to?
Yes. Oh. We have agreed a site visit. I just thought I was taking this. Talking like. Right.
I am sorry. We have agreed a site visit to Auchinleck.
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much.
Seems to be, I don't know whether it seems to be a bit of technical difficulties this morning with the links. Okay, so we've agreed, and I'm on to the Gaelic language plan.
Thanks, Chair. Good morning, members. So the production of the Gaelic language plan fulfils the statutory duty in the council under the 2005 Act. And members will recall that in May, 31st of May last year, we presented a new Gaelic language plan and members approved that. But since then, we've had further engagement with the Board Nagal, and Alia and colleagues have managed that engagement with the board. So we've had some further feedback on our plan, and that's reflected in the report today. So from paragraphs 7, 8, 9 and 10, you'll see the feedback that we have received, all very positive, and also we've managed to, through contacts with other parts of the council, other services and colleagues, agree our response to the issues that the board has suggested. So what we're presenting today, Chair, is some updates to the actual plan that was approved by Cabinet last year. They're set out in the detail in the appendix. You'll recall that when we did present this to a Cabinet last year, we had already concluded a detailed consultation and engagement programme as well. So this further update today reflects on all of that engagement activity with our communities and since then with the board. So it's presented today just for members' consideration and further approval. But, as I said, it's been pretty well accepted, and the board have acknowledged the positive strides that the council has made to achieve their priorities. And at paragraph 10, I would just bring one part to members' attention, and that is around the supplementary, the specific actions in relation to education, and the desire to have quite a specific measure around about increasing children accessing Gaelic medium education. So we have provided a detailed response to that, and we've included it in the appendix. We've set a target of 10%, but actually recognising that some of this is out with our control and is really parental choice around about increasing that child access, that we think we could go back to the board and moderate some of the wording around that. So as much as it's presented here for approval, there would be a continuing engagement with the board around that specific point, Chair, but recommendations are at paragraph 2, and I'm grateful to the support that Alia provides in all of this activity, and particularly that engagement with the board. So if you have any questions between Alia and myself, we'll be able to try and respond. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks, Ian. Members, any comments? Got a Gaelic learner here, Councillor Ingram.
Thanks very much. Yeah, as a kind of newer learner of Gaelic, I'm obviously really interested in the plan, and where, if possible, we can make connections between education and community groups that are set up for learners to come together. Obviously not just kids, but adults. So where I'm thinking is where parents might have children going to Gaelic school, learning in the classroom, how do we support the parents' learning of Gaelic as well? And that will help the kids as well. So to see that kind of closer link between community groups and education, where we can break down those silos maybe and move that forward.
Yeah, thank you very much for your comments, Councillor. In that regard, there are quite a lot of opportunities for the parents to come together with the learners. Obviously not in a classroom setting in terms of the young people accessing the normal education that they would have in our Gaelic medium setting, but we do offer quite a few kind of cultural opportunities, etc. I think ultimately if there was demand for that sort of Gaelic learning out in the community, we would be looking to discuss that with our colleagues in vibrant communities, potentially maybe utilising some of the teachers that we have, but that would all be based on availability, etc. So ultimately there's certainly no doors closed in that direction, but I think that would be discussion I would want to have with colleagues in vibrant communities and look at where any demand was in that particular space, because you rightly recognise that not all parents who send their young people to Gaelic medium education actually speak Gaelic themselves and might wish to. So yeah, just be availed of our support in the space and ongoing events, both cultural and social, in terms of promoting Gaelic language. That's okay, thank you.
Thanks, Linda.
Thanks for that.
Eddie?
I feel a bit like bah humbug here, but I feel I need to say it. Like we're going to be in a position where we're going to be bringing these really difficult decisions under the current revenue budget. So before we expand into any other areas of activity, I think we would need to be really clear about where the resource was coming, for that. So it's not going to limit, we clearly want to be ambitious for our communities, but at the same time, I do feel we need to temper some of that ambition within the resource that we have available around that. And I do feel a bit like, Mr. Bah Humbug around this, but at the same time, I think I need to be realistic, in terms of balancing some of the priorities that we have with some of the ambition that we have.
Well, that's all right, Eddie. That's why you get the big office you have. That's okay. Big broad shoulder.
No one's responded to Bah Humbug.
Neil.
Just to come back on that, what my thinking was that obviously that we have community groups established already, so there might not necessarily be any added cost. It's just how we link the two together. Even maybe just a wee poster in the schools saying this group exists. If parents want to go along to it, then that's hopefully wouldn't add too much cost to the budget.
Linda.
Yeah, thanks. And I take both points very well in that space, in that regard. I think the other issue we've got is clearly there are some e-learning opportunities available through eSchool. So it might be worth us looking at what's available in the virtual space on a less fiscally demanding basis in that regard. So ultimately, we might go and have a wee look. I'll certainly ask my digital officer to see what's out there that could potentially be made available free of charge to some of the community groups in that space also. So there's that opportunity as well to look at virtual learning.
Thanks, Linda. Okay. Can we agree the recommendations, page 88? Okay. Now that concludes the E-items for today. So we'll just give the education spokespersons a couple of minutes to disengage. Apologies, folks. There seems to be, I've had other people in the committee, there seems to be problems with some of the connections today. I don't know whether it's atmospheric or what. Trying to help where we can. Okay, on to item 5 now. And that is the levelling up found round 3. And that is the Belfield interchange. And over to Karen Purvis. Karen.
Thanks, Chair. The purpose of this report is to provide members with an update in relation to the Levelling Up Fund Round 3 transport bid relating to Belfield Interchange. Paragraphs 3 to 5 set out the background and that for Round 2 of the LUF, 2 bids were submitted for Cultural, Kilmarnock and Belfield Interchange. In January 23, the UK Government confirmed an award of £20 million in relation to Cultural Kilmarnock. Unfortunately, the £9.5 million bid for Belfield Interchange was unsuccessful because it did not demonstrate evidence of spend in the 22-23 financial year. Paragraphs 6 to 9 set out the approach to LUF Round 3. The third and final round moved away from the competitive approach of earlier rounds, and the Round 2 bid for Belfield Interchange was reconsidered as previously submitted, along with other Round 2 bids as part of the Round 3 process, and was unsuccessful. The Council has requested feedback from the UK Government setting out reasons why the bid was unsuccessful. The UK Government's decision not to open a formal LUF Round 3 application, or indeed to accept further supporting information for previously unsuccessful Round 2 applications, meant that the substantive work that had taken place to address our Round 2 feedback was not taken into consideration as part of the decision-making process. Paragraphs 10 to 23 set out next steps. The upgrade of this junction remains vital to the economic prospects of East Ayrshire and indeed the wider Pan-Ayrshire region. Belfield has long-standing significant challenges relating to pedestrian and vehicle safety, poor quality active travel networks and capacity constraints that need to be addressed to enable economic growth via strategic development and investment in Ayrshire. Detailed traffic modelling has been undertaken to assess options for works to the interchange, and paragraph 13 sets out the key features of the design for proposals. The original cost estimate to upgrade Belfield at the time of the Round 2 application was £10.5 million, less the 10% match funding, which resulted in an application to LUF for £9.5 million. However, after the application was submitted, Transport Scotland provided the original drawings for the interchange which required other works, and the figures being quoted have raised the overall project value to around £14 to £15 million. Per paragraph 17, unlike with Local Development Plan 1, as part of the transport appraisal for LDP 2 and of the proposed plan, as a council we acknowledge that Belfield Interchange requires upgrading to accommodate the growth that we're seeking to achieve through the Local Development Plan. As interchange forms part of the strategic road network, responsibility for the junction lies with Transport Scotland. However, they have indicated for a number of years that they expect the council to fund upgrades, and they have not prioritised Belfield in their strategic transport projects review 2, which sets out their infrastructure commitments all the way up to 2042. The examination report for LDP2, which was received in December last year, states that developer contributions will likely be required for developments in the area of Belfield Interchange, and that is indeed what we've proposed. However, if the issues that we've currently got with Belfield remain unresolved, then we will be required to address this in the next review of the local development plan. There are clearly issues at Belfield Interchange, and it's not only the developers of the 3 new sites around Belfield Interchange and the LDP who would benefit from any improvements. And the reporter is setting out in the examination conclusions that it is not reasonable or realistic to expect these developers to bear the full cost of funding the interchange, so we do need to look at alternative models. So we will be seeking an early meeting with our key stakeholders, including Scottish Government and Transport Scotland, to agree a way forward. Notwithstanding that, the interchange is not the council's asset, and the council is clear that Transport Scotland must take some financial responsibility for improvements to the interchange, which is their asset. There's a range of implications set out in the report. The only one I really want to pick out are the policy ones. We don't really clearly know the policy implications of not upgrading the interchange in the kind of medium to long term. We are required as part of LDP 3, which we'll start working on now, to undertake an evidence report and gate check, which is almost like an examination at the start of the plan, as well as one at the end, which and part of that process is to ensure we have the relevant infrastructure in place to undertake what is included in the plan, and this might be difficult as a result of the ongoing lack of funding resolution. I'm happy to take any questions. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks, Karen. I really welcome this paper. I think it's high time we had this discussion about the Belfield interchange, because we know, as a council and the local members know, just what a major issue this is just for our communities. We might not know what the policy restrictions are with this, but we know what the economic restrictions are. We can't address some of the issues of population decline we've got along the A76 and A71 and right across East Ayrshire and Kilmarnock and Cumnock and the whole of Ayrshire, north and south, until we unlock the kind of gridlock, the bottleneck that we've got here. And East Ayrshire, it's not just, we know only too well every time you put on the radio there's another accident near when we got this paper last week. It just was at the same time there was a major accident on the Belfield interchange, and we know what a blockage does in terms of restricted movement in the area. But it's the long-term growth, and I think it's absolutely scandalous that Transport Scotland doesn't think this is a priority before 2042, and I think we absolutely should be lobbying really hard, but producing the evidence, not just in terms, I think we've got readily available information in terms of accident details, sadly, in some respects, but we need to really put the case, just in terms of how it's restricting the movement and how it's restricting house building and other economic growth, while other areas of Scotland, particularly in the East Coast, seem to be thriving at the moment. But it affects right across Ayrshire and the South West, and we need to be making that point pretty clear. But I've got to say, in terms of projects in the South West of Scotland, investment in an area which we've seen as a decline in terms of population, there's been very scant in terms of investment plan for in the future. So we've really got to address that and address it hard and take colleagues with us, whether it's parliamentarians or other local authorities, to lobby hard for this, because it's just the stance of Transport Scotland here is nothing short of scandalous from my point of view, for where I'm coming from. So we've got to shout loud but with very good arguments, as well as noisy arguments to put forward, and we've got to really make the case for it. And we'd be looking to have the support of others. And I would immediately be looking for a meeting with the head of Transport Scotland and the Transport Minister, and bring them down here just to look firsthand just some of the issues it's causing, because we know that through our, in terms of accidents, but in terms of the LDP2 and others, what restrictions that's affecting in terms of growth. But right across the Ayrshire growth deal as well, as we know only too well. Sorry if but I think it's really it's an absolute priority for us to get this on the political agenda. Members, Maureen.
Just to say, I thank you very much. I do agree with everything that you're saying. You know, I have been very supportive of wanting to move forward, make progress in relation to the Belfield roundabout. Everything that you have said, I absolutely concur with. It's absolutely essential that we get movement on this. And I know that we have already agreed for the purposes of the LDP2 and the decisions taken by SEPA, a ministerial visit. I think this is probably something else that needs to get added onto the agenda for that, just so as that we take every opportunity to make sure that at any level of government that we can influence, that people understand exactly how serious these issues are to us, and that we are keen, we are willing, and we are more than able to move forward. But we do need other people to step up to the table as well, just as you have said and explained.
Thanks, Maureen. Yeah, I appreciate those comments, and I think we need to just prepare that case and get a strategy on just how we address this issue, because it really is important for us. Graham?
Thanks, Dougie. I think you covered most of the things I was going to say. I mean, I live in New Farm, and I take the trip down for the Grassyards Junction down to the Belfield interchange, which should take you a couple of minutes, but at peak traffic, that's a half an hour nightmare journey. And you see the queues of traffic in that inside lane. It's just going to be tragic accidents happening there all the time unless we get this sorted. You need to have the reactions of mongoose or use the force to get on that roundabout at the Q8, the Belfield interchange. It's really dangerous, needs addressed. But I would like to should take the opportunity to have a wider review of the road infrastructure. Just half an hour down the road, you've got Hurlfoot Cross, the roundabout there, and that's also struggling under the capacity, the roads.
I think folk avoid the Belfield roundabout. I mean, at peak times I certainly do, where it's probably on, it should be the route you choose, and you end up going through some of the urban bits of town just to avoid it, because you know it's going to be busy at peak times. So you're absolutely right to highlight that, Graham, in terms of it's causing congestion elsewhere, and with that, sadly, potential accidents, in our communities. So this is a main priority for us. So hopefully we can get around this and get a campaign going, lobby, get friends round about us and lobby where we can and strongly as we can. Okay, anything else? Okay, can we agree the recommendations, and thanks for that report, Carl. Okay, next is, I've got to exclude the press and public, can we agree? And can IT stop recording, please? Okay. Okay, can we proceed with